So, ecosystem, let's define that first. Okay, so when we look at an ecosystem, what we're going to call it is all the living and non-living we'll say factors that are interacting in the same area. That's going to be kind of our working definition of what an ecosystem is. It's all the living and non-living things that are interacting with each other. That's a big key idea in ecology, is that these living things interact with each other in the same area. So we first need to kind of look at some vocabulary terms. And there are vocabulary words that we use for living and non-living factors. So we'll start with the more challenging one. Non-living, we call these abiotic factors. Okay, that word bio's in there. What does bio mean again? It's life. Okay, biology is the study of life. Bio means life. So you put the A in front of it, and that kind of makes it a negative kind of word. So it's the non-living things. Now these are always challenging for students to understand. So we'll write here non-living. So what most students say right away when I say non-living, they think of like things that aren't alive, like rocks and your desk and your T-shirt. Okay? Okay, viruses, I guess you can consider them there too. Good. Okay, but I'm not talking about non-living things. I'm talking about non-living factors, things about the area that aren't alive. For example, put some examples. Weather, like temperature, is a non-living thing. It's not alive for sure, but it does have an impact on an ecosystem. Okay, it's definitely going to impact the ecosystem some way. For example, in our lab that we did with the antibiotics, temperature had an impact on how well the bacteria grew. We had to grow them in an incubator so they would grow well. They grow well at 37 degrees Celsius. They don't grow well at 20 degrees Celsius, which is what this room is. And so we have to have the right environment for them to do well. That's an abiotic factor. It's a non-living factor that has an impact on the environment. So what are some other examples you guys can think of that might be abiotic, non-living, but they're not a non-living thing? I don't want you to say like a piece of paper. Yeah, Jefferson. What about the water? Think about what about the water? What would be a factor of the water you can think of?
Oh, the thingies in the water.
The thingies in the water. I'm sorry, what? Okay, pollution in the water. That'd be good. Pollution levels. That would be a great abiotic factor. Yeah.
I don't know. Habitat.
Again, what about it? What about the habitat that's not living?
Destruction of the habitat?
That's not a factor about it. That's something happening to it. Yeah. No, grass is actually living, so we'll put that in the living section. We'll come to that later. Okay? Non-living factors. Things that, think about this, think about this room. Think about the water. Think about what's outside that can change. Yeah, oxygen. Percent oxygen is a great one. Percent O2, especially in water. The surface has lots of oxygen in the water. The deep underneath the lake has very little oxygen. Great abiotic factor. Michael, what about it?
The molecule.
What about the dirt? What factor about it? I don't want to know what it does. I want to know what about it is abiotic. Yeah. What about the weather? We have temperature. Rainfall, great one. How much rainfall the area gets. Think about this ecosystem in this area. We get a decent amount of rainfall. Think about Arizona. very different amount of rainfall. That's a good example of an abiotic factor. Yeah?
Could a place be it? Like it's like a place and then earthquake hits it and it changes?
I'm not looking for change. I'm just looking for factors. Things that you can measure about an environment. Yeah?
Sun.
Sunlight. UV. Right. That's a good one. UV radiation is one. Samantha. What about the volcano? Yeah. Okay, I guess we could say lava. I mean, I'll put that on there with a question mark.
What about Ebola?
Okay. We're not going to talk about Ebola. One. Snowfall. Kind of goes with rainfall, but we'll put it there. Because.
Hailfall.
Okay. Well, yeah, we can go.
Leaves. Let's go.
Like provide like homes for like ants.
You're right, but what about the dirt, though? I'm talking about. You're thinking noun. I'm thinking something that describes that noun. Okay. Yes, Eli.
How many nutrients are in the soil?
So nutrient concentration. Okay, there's all kinds of nutrients we could measure, like ammonia concentrations or nitrate nutrients. Okay, so we gotta move on.
No.
So, okay, Jonas, go ahead and give your one.
Fire. Fire.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks.
Okay, there are.
Original idea.
No, that's a good one.
Original idea.
The occurrence of fires.
I created it.
In savannas, fires happen yearly. In tropical rainforests, they should never happen at all. How often a fire occurs could be an abiotic factor. That's a great example. All right, biotic factors. These are easy. These are all the living things. I'm not going to even ask you guys because we can come up with a list of 1,000,001 different living things. But biotic factors, everything that's living in the environment. So you're a biotic factor. Your dog is a biotic factor. Even the bacteria that are on your skin. Well, of course your mom's a biotic factor. Okay? Those are all living things. All right, so those are some vocab words you're going to have to know. Now we're going to move on to... One thing we didn't talk about was energy. That's a abiotic factor. We're going to talk about energy.
Isn't that like sun?
You're right. Energy comes from the sun. We're going to talk about energy flow.
Is the sun really living or are you dead?
The sun is not alive. It's a ball of hydrogen and helium. So, we've already talked about that all, guys, come on, all living things require energy to survive. In fact, it's a requirement of all living things. So energy flow is pretty important in an ecosystem. So, as some people have already mentioned, our energy source ultimately is the sun. That's what provides the energy to all living things. Okay, so living things get their energy from the sun. And I'm going to put my shorthand way of writing energy as an E with quotations around it. So I don't have to write energy every single time in my notes. So you can use the same one if you want. So ultimately, our energy comes from the sun. Now, when you guys go outside and you look up at the sun, hopefully you don't look directly at it, but maybe you go suntanning in the summer. Are you getting energy by doing that?
Yes.
Do you feel like, oh, I'm really hungry. I'm going to go stare at the sun for a little bit and get full? Does that happen? Do we get energy directly from the sun as human beings? No, we don't. Okay, you're right. You do get vitamin D. You do get tan or burned, but that doesn't give you energy. Where do we get our energy from? Jefferson, thank you for raising your hand. We get it from the plants and animals that we eat. Okay, so we can't get it from the sun directly, so we have to get it from somewhere else. So what are the organisms called that can get it from the sun directly? They're called producers. Okay, they can directly use sunlight. So they use sun energy or light energy to make food. In fact, we often call these guys autotrophs.
Oh, didn't we just learn about
We just learned that word in bacteria, right? Bacteria can be autotrophs. Okay? They use sunlight energy and can make their own food, something we can't do. But they're the ones that provide the food energy for the entire ecosystem. So they're pretty important. We wouldn't be around without plants producing energy for us. Okay, we would not be here without them because they provide all the energy that we consume as food energy. So they basically make their own food using sunlight. So that's an important concept, important word. Now, so what do we call ourselves? Well, we are called consumers. Okay, consumers have to eat. And I'm going to put that in quotes. Because not all things eat the way we eat. When you think about eating, you're taking food, putting it in your mouth, chewing it up, swallowing it, goes in your stomach, and it gives you energy. All right, that's how we eat. That's not how all things get their food or eat, okay? So there's different kinds of consumers. So if you look at this picture here, we'll look at this first group. They're called the herbivores.
Don't you mean herbivores?
That's what I said, herbivores.
You were saying, never mind.
Okay? If you see that word herb in there, what does that make you think of? Makes you think of a plant. Herbivores eat plants. They eat producers. They get their energy from the producer group directly. And that's all they do. That's the only thing they consume for food, for energy, are the producers. So are we herbivores?
Some of us.
You're right. Well, some people argue that some people are because they're considered what?
Vegetarian.
Vegetarian. But I'm going to say you're still not, even if you're a vegetarian, because you choose to only eat vegetables. You could eat meat if you needed to. Okay, so technically we're not herbivores. Even though we can decide to be them, technically we're not, by definition. So, the other group are called carnivores. Okay? And a lot of people think of carnivores as like meat eaters. Okay? But we're going to say carnivores, I'm going to put down eat other consumers. Okay? They don't eat producers. They eat things that eat producers. They eat things that consume plants, for example. So are we carnivores? Well, no, we're not cannibals. At least hope not. Okay? Hey, Jefferson, I think you said what we are. What are we? We are omnivores.
I consider myself a carnivore.
But again, you have the right machinery, right digestive system to eat both. So technically you're an omnivore, even if you choose only to eat meat. So they eat both. Consumers and producers. So we can eat a steak for dinner. You can also eat a baked potato with that steak. You have both a producer and you have a consumer on your plate. You are an omnivore. Yes? What kind of animal eats only herbivores? Or what kind of animals are herbivores?
Some dinosaurs.
Cows, deer.
Those big tall dinosaurs. That
Some dinosaurs were probably herbivores. Chickens. Okay? They eat only plant products. Now, there's one more on here. We've talked about carnivores. We talked about the omnivore. This mouse over here is an omnivore. The last group we're going to talk about, we've talked about producers, is decomposers. Okay? What are decomposers?
the things that like
What are decomposers? Peter, thank you for raising your hand, being patient.
Isn't it like eating something that's like not dead, but like
Yes, Dad.
well, yeah, kind of.
Yeah. I'm going to put it in quotes because they don't eat like we eat, but they eat dead.
Isn't that like
We eat dead organisms or dead, we'll say dead. I guess organisms works.
It's a tart.
isn't it like eating like dirt or something?
Mr. Wall.
Not necessarily dirt. Parts of the dirt, I guess. But what also decomposers eat is also animal waste products. When animals go to the bathroom in the woods, something has to break it down. Because think about it, if something didn't, the woods would be full of animal poop. And it would just be sitting there forever. Something breaks it down and returns the nutrients to the soil. And that's the key with decomposers. They return nutrients to the soil for the producers to use. So these guys work really closely. Carlos, I'll get your question in a second. Just be patient. Okay? These two guys work closely together. Decomposers and producers are kind of tied together. Yes, Carlos?
Aren't there another thing called cannibal?
Yes, there are things called cannibals, and that's when you eat things like yourself. And that's very common, actually, in the animal kingdom. It's kind of taboo for humans, so there are still civilizations that practice it. Yes?
In geography, we learn about like people in Africa eating grass. So are they herbivores?
No, because they still have the machinery to eat meat. They just don't have the ability. They don't have the access to it. All humans are omnivores. We have the right type of digestive system to digest both starches, which are plant foods. We get starches from plants, and proteins, which we get from meat.
If you're a vegetarian your whole life, can your immune system not grow and just be a herbivore? I mean,
You could develop problems eating meat later on because your body kind of acclimates, but you still, with small amounts, could eventually consume meat. All right, so we talked. These are a lot of vocabulary terms that I think a lot of you already have seen before. We got one more big topic to talk about, and that is a food web.
oh, 6th grade.
Yeah, this brings back memories, right?
Yeah, it's 6th grade.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. A food web is just a bunch of connected food chains. So let's take a look at this food web here that we have drawn on your notes.
Does that say connected food?
Connected food chains. Okay, so I'm going to point out one food chain on this map here. Let me pick a bright color so we can easily see it. Let's start down here with the marsh grass. Okay, the marsh grass gets its energy, it's a producer, from the sun. This ribbed mussel, which is a crustacean, it's a shelled organism, gets its energy from eating the marsh grass. If we have issues, I might have to ask you guys to leave. Okay? So, this arrow is showing that the energy is going from the marsh grass to this mussel. Well, this mussel is going to be eaten by another carnivore called a heron. So its energy goes to the heron. So that's a food chain. We have the marsh grass, then the ribbed mussel, then the heron. That's one food chain. Notice the arrows point in the direction that energy is flowing. It's going from the grass to the mussel to the heron. Another food chain, pick a different color. We can have, let's start at the same spot, marsh grass. Well, actually, it's not a good spot to start, never mind. Let's start over here with the pickled weed, this guy down here. Okay, another producer in the same ecosystem. Energy goes to this mouse, which then energy goes to a hawk. It's another food chain. In the same ecosystem, though. But here's the difference between a food chain and a food web. That's just one path. Okay, we have two different paths. We can also take a different path from this pickled weed. We can go from pickled weed to the grasshopper, which then goes to the mouse, which then goes to the hawk. So it's a different pathway. That's a better example of where the energy could go, and that's a food web. A food web shows all the connections, not just one food chain. Okay? So food webs are a bunch of connected food chains. All right. That's where we're going to stop with our notes today.